So I sat my King's College interview, or MMI, about 4 years ago in, I think, December 2019. And I got my offer about a month later in January, or late December again. So it was a pretty quick turnaround, but that's not really the point. I wanted to talk today about the King's College interview process, a little bit about my experience at the MMI, which might help you guys if you're prepping for one, and also talk a bit about what you can do to prepare for the King's College interview specifically. But a lot of the things we talk about are going to be broadly useful to pretty much any MMI anyway. So I'm not sure about the King's College interview and whether it's changed. It might be online now or asynchronous, whatever it is, the broad structure of the MMI is going to be the exact same pretty much. And they're going to test the same things. So in terms of my experience, I obviously travelled in person to the King's College campus, and once we arrived there, we had to wait in like a little hallway area, and obviously it's really busy when it was in person. You know, there were loads of people coming to and fro lectures and sessions and tutorials. I went in there and was outside the little room, and when you go in, it's like about 8 stations. There's 7 or 8 stations, and you basically circulate through each one until you've done all of them. That's really what there is. There aren't any rest stations per se. I think there are some on other university MMI rotations, but for King's College there certainly isn't. Now, let's talk about the interview itself. So regardless, again, whether this is online, you'll still probably be tested on the 8 stations or 7 stations, and the timings will be the same, so I think it was about 7 minutes per station for us. One common question is that if you finish the station early, what happens? Well, in my case, I finished a few stations early, and what happened is the interview will tell you normally you can basically sit there in silence, which is fine for the rest of the station, or if you come up with anything that you want to add to the station, you can add that in. So it's nice, it's relaxed. If you finish like a minute early, you can spend that minute just sitting there, which is fine if you're happy, and if you want to add something, you can just say, okay, for this question I'd also like to say this, and that's fine as well. They'll add it onto the mark scheme. For finishing early, you don't get deducted marks if you've ticked off everything, and if you said everything, that's fine. They're not going to penalise you for finishing early. Now, the stations themselves are pretty bog standard. There aren't any weird stations. I know some interviewers like to ask weird questions in some universities and some degrees, but I think medical degrees, they ask the same stations at each university, so don't be surprised. It's all bog standard things. Kings really like to assess your values as a doctor, so some of the things that you should be revising generally are things like resilience, teamwork, leadership. All these things are really important because they tell the interviewer how good you will be as a doctor. So they like to assess you on this. So I'd really go through all the things that you've done, your work experience, your volunteering, and just go through how each of them has essentially bottled down and sort of developed these things for you. And you're probably more likely to develop these things on volunteering and your extracurricular than you are on things like work experience. I always say to reflect. This is really important. The other thing with Kings is they will ask you a few questions on data analysis, I think. That most universities do anyway. So data analysis is always really important. So you should be revising things like bar graphs, line graphs, how to analyze them. And this is again a station that can come up at any interview. It's pretty common, and it's one that catches people out because they don't really prepare for it too much. Things like analyzing graphs, making conclusions, what you could improve about a certain graph. And yeah, it's GCSE level maths. There's nothing too complicated about it. It's just how you analyze it. So a good way to do this is go through GCSE textbooks, data analysis things. Just had a pandemic, and there are loads of line graphs and bar graphs coming out of COVID. Go through a few of those bar graphs and line graphs on BBC News that you see. Try and understand what it's saying to you, whether it's a good graph, whether it's a bad graph. There's no real right or wrong answer. It's about your opinion and how you formulate an argument. So again, that's a really important station. And finally, King's College themselves, the interviewers aren't always going to be people on the admission staff, for example, and King's College particularly like to bring people like nurses, doctors, physiotherapists, and so they will ask you a lot of questions in the context of working as a clinical doctor. So it's really important that you understand what life's going to be like. Working in part of an MDT, that's a good place to start if you don't have any idea about what to even say. So start to research about what an MDT is, be confident about what it is, and not only what it is, but the different parts of the MDT, the doctors, the physiotherapists, the nurses, pharmacists, occupational therapists. All these different people have different roles for patient care, so make sure you know what each one does, why they're really important, because they will probably ask you things. And if a physiotherapy is doing one of your stations and you don't know what a physiotherapist is, that's not going to paint too well of a picture. So there are loads of resources out there for this. You can go on the Medic portal, you can go on the NHS website. There are so many different things that you can do here, and it's something that I really recommend you get in the habit of doing and knowing essentially what an MDT is and what different parts of the clinical team are going to be. So that's really important for Kings. And aside from that, that's really all there is to it. Those are 3 sort of major things I think you should know, and if you've covered each of those 3 things in your revision, I think you'll be absolutely fine for the King's interview. Aside from that, it's really nice, it's relaxed. If you have to go in person, it's fine. If it's online, that's also fine. They'll test the same thing, so don't worry about it being online this year, not last year. The exact same things are going to come up. It's purely the format that's changed. So if you could want any more videos on station specific things, so a roleplay station video, a work experience station, I've done all of these things on my channel, so there's a playlist full of MMI videos for you to go and help. If you want BMAT or personal statement things, those are also on the channel, and stuff about medical school as well. I go to Imperial College now, so if you want to see stuff about that, that's also on the channel. So hopefully that helped, and I'll see you all in the next video. See you in a bit.